Hello everyone, Ariam here, and welcome back to another Draw and Discuss. And today we're tackling a hot topic. Did T-Rex have feathers? Since the discovery of the fossilized Archaeopteryx that let the world know that some prehistoric animals previously thought to be basically just big lizards could have had feathers, the question has been which dinosaurs had feathers and which dinosaurs didn't. Now, you might think it's a pretty open and shut case. Dinosaurs that were similar to modern-day birds, like raptors and other dromaeosaurids, probably had feathers. They're very bird-like. But if you think of a dinosaur like a sauropod, that's not quite like a bird at all, so it probably didn't have feathers. And it seems to make sense. But rules always have exceptions, and some dinosaurs that don't seem very bird-like at all may have had feathers, proto-feathers, or feather-like quills. For example, as we discussed on a previous Dinosaur Days episode, the ancestors to ceratopsians, like Triceratops, had quills, and so ceratopsians, even more modern ones like Styracosaurus, may very well have had quills. And many species of flying reptiles, the pterosaurs, while not dinosaurs or linked to birds, may have had pycnofibers, which are small, hair-like, feather-like filaments that may have kept them warm. So the whole closer to bird, feathers, farther from bird, no feathers, isn't really the most accurate way of telling if a dinosaur may have had feather-like filaments on their body. So let's talk about the most famous dinosaur of all, the Tyrannosaurus rex, and whether or not it had feathers. There are plenty of artist renditions of Tyrannosaurus rex, both with and without feathers, and so, really, who's right? It does seem from several angles of evidence that adult T-Rexes at least would not have been feathered. Sorry to everybody who was hoping for a glorious mane of feathers on this tyrant king. Why would an animal need feathers in the first place? Well, there are two main reasons. For flight purposes, and for keeping warm. Now, of course, feathers can be used for other things, like display, but that is probably a secondary use that came after the primary need for feathers for warmth or flight. So, did a Tyrannosaurus rex need feathers for flight? No. Next question. Did Tyrannosaurus rex need feathers for warmth? This is where that caveat comes in. An adult Tyrannosaurus rex absolutely would not need feathers for warmth because it would have been warm-blooded-ish. It's kind of complicated, but dinosaurs are mostly considered warm-blooded-ish. And large warm-blooded animals, like elephants, don't need extra fur or feathers because they produce so much body heat on their own. Their main issue actually is making sure they can stay cool enough to process the right way. So an adult Tyrannosaurus rex would not have needed feathers for warmth. However, it is possible that hatchling T-Rexes and maybe even younglings would have had a fine, feathery fuzz about them. This is not confirmed by any evidence, but it does make sense. Chicks would have a harder time thermoregulating because of their smaller body size, and a fine layer of fuzz makes sense, and is also very cute to think about. It's unclear, though, since this fuzz idea is really unsubstantiated, if this fuzz would have been feathers, proto-feathers, pycnofibers, or other filaments that are feathers or feather adjacent. So we really don't know, but it is a fun idea. Now, does this mean that no tyrannosaurids or no large theropod dinosaurs had feathers? No, it doesn't. Just because an adult T-Rex would have been capable living and processing temperature just fine without feathers doesn't mean that all dinosaurs of all stages, ages, or sizes could do the same. Tyrannosaurus rex likely did have some family members that did have feathers or feather-like filaments. In fact, a Chinese tyrannosaurid called Dilong paradoxus was found fossilized with feather-like filaments on its body. And this does make sense. It was a smaller tyrannosaurid in a colder climate, so it likely did need feathers or feather-like filaments in order to stay warm. A different larger tyrannosaurid, Eutyrannus, lived in a cooler environment with significantly cooler seasons and does have direct evidence of some downy like feather filaments on its body. It should be noted that even on these more advanced tyrannosaurids, the feather filaments are still stage 1 feathers. This means that they are simple fibers like the fuzzy down you would find on a chick or duckling. These are not feathers used for flight, and these are not feathers that you would find on the body of any adult bird. These are very simplistic, very basal feathers. Since the purpose of these feathers is for warmth and not for flight, it's possible that that's all these dinosaurs required, and we might not find any tyrannosaurid with stage 2 or 3 fully formed feathers, since those are more for flight and insulation, especially waterproofing, which these dinosaurs really wouldn't need. All this to say, there's no evidence that Tyrannosaurus rex as an adult would have had feathers. In fact, there have been skin indentations captured within rocks that shows that they likely had scaly skin instead of feathers. So, sorry to rain on everyone's parade, but a feathered T-Rex really isn't going to happen. Unless, of course, newly hatched babies and younglings had that downy fuzz we talked about earlier. Then that might be as close to a feathered T-Rex as you're going to get. Of course, this doesn't mean that adult T-Rexes didn't have occasional pycnofibers or feather filaments sparsely spread around their body the way elephants have strands of hair occasionally, but an adult T-Rex would not have needed it for warmth, and they absolutely could not fly, so there's really no reason for a T-Rex to have feathers. So, if you want a medium-sized Tyrannosaurid that did have feathers, or at least evidence of feathers, I can direct you to the Eutyrannus. And if you want something of a bit of a different flavor, it's unconfirmed, but it is believed that the Nanuqsaurus would have had feathers as well, considering it was about the same size and lived in a similarly cold region as the Eutyrannus. So instead of thinking about feathers as how close a dinosaur is related to modern birds, which certainly does help the case, think about feathers more in terms of a job. Would the dinosaur have needed them to fly or glide? Would the dinosaur have needed feathers to stay warm? If the answer to either of these two is yes, there's a little bit more of a case to start thinking about whether feathers may have existed on this animal or not. So instead of thinking about how sauropods aren't really closely related to modern-day birds, so that's why they didn't have feathers, think about the fact that these animals were so giant and warm-blooded-ish that they would have produced enough body heat to keep themselves warm without feathers, and feathers would have likely given them heat stroke. So what do you think? Do you prefer the idea that T-Rex would have been fully feathered, or at least partially feathered? Or do you prefer it as more of the original naked way? What other dinosaurs or prehistoric animals do you think could have been feathered, but we just haven't found evidence for it yet? And as always, if you have suggestions for future long-form videos or suggestions on improving these videos in general, please let me know in the comments down below. I hope you all go outside, take a little walk, do something good for yourself, and remember to smile.